Calling to order MUD 47 June meeting. We're now 6:06. Our first group before us was late. Okay. And any comments from the public tonight? Do you have anyone on the list? Okay. And any adjustments tonight, Mike? Or anything? Okay, good. That gets us to number 4 through 8 on the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, do you have a second? Any discussion, questions, comments from anyone? Minutes look good, all that, okay. All right, consent agenda done, very good, well done. Okay, regular session. Going to number 9, the SJRA Woodlands Division report.
Good evening. Reports in your packet. I think it was page 17 or 19 through 30 something. If you have any questions on that, I can definitely go through those, but I did want to let you know prior to the meeting, Ed passed out a flash drive. That flash drive has on it all the wastewater strategic plan information, all the AC water line information, current project plan presentation, and all the contracts between MUD 47 and the river. So we got you some stuff to read for the next month and come back with any questions y'all may have on the. Besides that, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to.
Thanks for that. That's a really
Andy.
helpful to have all that information. I'm looking forward to looking at it, reading it.
If there's anything you see that's not on there that you're looking for that we missed, just let us know. We'll get it.
So we're going to talk about the wastewater separately, supplement agreements. From the budget. I have 2 questions, but they might be able to come then. Maybe I'll ask one now. So I'm thinking of wastewater treatment plant numbers 2 and 3, okay? And thinking about them down the road, a decade or 2 decades down the road. How do you feel about the maintenance plan around them and all the work we're doing and the budgets that are being approved and the work that you're kind of considering around those 2 plants in particular, so that you fast forward down the road a couple of decades, that we know we can assure continued life. We don't have such a dire situation like we do in number 1, let's say. Can you help us maybe what you're thinking about there, what you do differently, what you have already started doing differently? Just
So wastewater plant 1 was definitely the lessons learned. Plant 1 being the original one from 1975, a lot of the technology we have today, we did not have back then. And so one thing at plants 2 and 3 that we've done from the beginning is a lot of the basins, especially at the water lines, air lines, they have concrete coated. Okay. Plant 1, that was added basically to rebuild concrete and put a coating to maintain the service life. When we're putting it in a plant 2, we're doing it to extend the service life, right? So plant 2 is basically better concrete to start with, add coating, extend the life, probably another 10, 15 years or so. A lot of mechanical type items at plant 2 that do have 20, 25 year lifespan, but we have very good maintenance plans of every 10 to 15 years, replacing rotating assemblies, going with stainless steel, more long-term life type items. Anything major that's out there, like the bell press building at plant 2, is basically a metal building. Right, so you take a metal building and you put it in an environment full of hydrogen sulfide, even if it's coated, it's going to start to erode. So we've gone through and started cutting out some of the erosion and adding in new panels that are coated. But we do have a project out there to rebuild that entire structure in, I think, about 5 years. So something that's a little bit more long lasting. So whereas plant 1, we went over time, had 4 phases of improvement, and then it got to where it is today. Plant 2, as we reinstall stuff, we are looking to say, okay, can we make this last 50 years and how's it going to pay in with everything else? So plant 1 has a lot of band-aids to get us to where we are. Plant 2, we're building for the future. That does not mean you're not going to have the same conversation at some point in time, because at some point you can only put so much coating and repairs and crack sealants on stuff, but we are looking at to make sure if there are things we didn't do at plant 1 or things we're doing now, plants 2 and 3, we're doing the same things. So plant 3, for example, was a metal package plant when we first, inherited it from the city of Conroe. That was torn down a couple of years ago, built with a new concrete facility going in. And so you should have until easy 2050 before you have to do any conversations like this out there. Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's helpful. It's helpful.
Have y'all had a tour of plant two? That may be something at some point in time when it gets a little bit cooler. We take a look at doing just to see that there is a stark difference when you look at wastewater plant one versus wastewater plants 2 and 3. Kind of like going to a school that was built in the 70s, 80s versus a school that's built today, just how the walls are built, the construction, everything else. Maybe worthwhile just to kind of see, so y'all can see the difference of what we see every day. So
I think we could do that before the next month.
we can do it at any point in time. If you just want to give us a call at some point, we can take anybody out at any point in time. But if we're going to take a group of people, it's better usually in the fall time just because, to be honest, it gets hot. And right
No shame.
there is no shade. But besides that, if you want to have a good in-depth conversation, it's usually not when 90 degrees is bearing down on you in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to come out, anybody, at any point in time, just call us up, let us know, shoot us an email, let Eric know, and then he'll let us know. We'll set something up.
I know we talked about the GRP tour. Yeah, I'd like to do that too.
Yeah, I've had, actually today, I've had a couple inquiries about that. And what I'd like to do is maybe send out a reminder or an inquiry just to see how many want to do it. Because it's better to do it as a group. I give a tour or work with Esri to tour it every year. And what we've found is no more than about 20 is probably realistic, from the standpoint of being able to hear and getting close enough. And as you're going into different rooms to see different things within the plant, being close enough to kind of hear the spiel is worthwhile. I mean, some of y'all experienced that at the treatment plant the other day, right? It's a big group. We're kind of moving around. Things are loud, so it's kind of hard to hear. And there's no different at the GRP facility too. A lot of pumps and loud noise that's going on. But I'd like to put it together, whenever you like. So I think right now I've got probably 5 or 6 that in my mind just officially that I can think of that have asked to want to go see it.
Yeah, I missed the first one. I was out
I
there.
really enjoyed the Woodlands Water and the SGRA orientations over the last couple of weeks. They were pretty good. Thank you, guys.
Sure, absolutely.
If you're at GRP and want to tour the dam, I'll offer Bretta for the tour of the dam. It's right there.
Yes.
2 for 1, you know?
They might even open it for you. Open the gates.
Ready to be open.
It's the in action.
Has it been closed lately?
Not much.
Not much.
Okay. Well, good. Thanks. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Any other questions for SJRA on their items? Okay, let's go to the item 10, the water reclamation facility number 1 discussion.
Go to page 35 and 36. What prompted the email is we had a number of comments, questions, inquiries before the election and also following the election, even as late as the new director orientation, and even had a request tonight on a matter. And a number of the questions were related to, all right, you did a full analysis feasibility of MBR technology, and that got started pretty early in phase 1 of the strategic plan. Why didn't you continue the analysis for conventional treatment through phase 1 and phase 2? Well, it gets down to part of it was cost related, and the stakeholders being a representative from each of the MUDs plus some community leaders being in those meetings, they made decisions through the process to say, all right, we think MBR is the direction that we would like to see SGRA go. And so that's what got studied further. It was, call it a semi full-blown analysis on MBR. We have a pretty robust cost estimate. We know we have a basic layout. But because the questions are coming up on conventional technology, conventional treatment, and then nobody's really raised the question about how these projects would be delivered, but we're thinking about it internally. We wanted to come back to y'all with a request of, based on the inquiries we're getting, we think it's time to ask the question, do you want one more feasibility to look at conventional versus MBR? And then the third item in here on the first dark bullet point is replace in place. And you heard a presentation a month or so ago from David Munn that talked about if you do a certain amount of repairs at the sewer plant, if you spend $30+ million, that's wasted money because the net present value of that kind of negates any benefit that you receive. So we put this together and say, all right, let's do a full comparison, a true advantages, disadvantages of the three options. Replace in place, conventional technology, and then MBR. Look at the disadvantages and advantages of all three of those and line them up together. Then the other part of it is, okay, how are we going to deliver the product? There are two essential ways that we are looking right now. One is competitive sealed proposal, and that is a process we use every day, day in and day out with the majority of our projects. And that's where when the contractor bids on the project, he's evaluated 50% is based on his price. The rest of it is based on his ability to explain how he's going to approach the project. So we're just not relying on bottom dollar. But to do competitive sealed proposal on a sewer plant of this magnitude probably requires some other ancillary services like a program manager and somebody to help manage the project, just because of the limited staff that we have at TSD. The other option would be a construction manager at risk, a CMAR. And you'll see school districts use CMAR day in and day out because that's how they get a maximum price, and they can work with the contractor and the architect during the process. The same thing we would do if we chose CMAR. Contractor would work with us, kind of help do value engineering and help us identify quicker ways and better ways to design and construct this project. We might spec a basin by a certain size, but the contractor's forms might not match up there, and so we'd have to have something special built. So if we kind of massage some things with the contractor's help, we can possibly deliver a project a little bit less expensive and still gain what we need to accomplish. Again, we would evaluate advantages and disadvantages of those two delivery methods. Under CMAR, statute requires that we have an owner advisor. And so that's an added consulting cost. They also bring some expertise to the project. They would help us with various technologies and processes and procedures that might help streamline and work with improve the value engineering. On the MBR, and I'm down to the third bullet point, dark bullet point, where we talk about site layouts. We already have a conceptual site layout for MBR, but we need one for conventional on new land. And then if you rebuild or replace in place, and you start dealing with the plant currently was designed under an old chapter of rules, and there's a new chapter of rules through the state. That might require additional basins here and there. And so we would need a new layout as to how things would fit within the site and whether that actually forces us into the new land that's being acquired. The next item is do cost estimates. And you've seen the extent of the cost estimate for the MBR. We would go to the same extremes to do that cost estimate for these other two methods. We're looking at a 50-year planning horizon, so it would include construction costs plus operation and maintenance for the next 50 years. And that would also, that's going to identify mechanical and electrical equipment that gets replaced at 20 or 25 years. And also looks at escalation of costs and electricity and just chemicals and the whole works. So I'm on page 36 now. Also, we would come back and give you an order of magnitude of how one of these projects might impact the rest. And it would be, because we're evaluating the three projects all with the same planning horizon, all with being built as one phase, not spread out over time. That's the only way we can give you a true fair comparison of each of those options. And then the final thing is, we know that because of our limited staff, we may need some internal manpower, or we may need some external manpower to help deliver the project through design and construction. So we want to make certain that we are looking at all aspects of the project, and we're bringing a complete cost to you to show, here's what we think is going to happen, or through design and also ultimately through the 15-year horizon. The thing to stress is, we've heard a couple of directors say you need to have this done by an independent consultant, and we agree. We're very happy with what Freeze has done, but it would be helpful for you all to, and for some of the naysayers to actually acknowledge that maybe this is truly something that needs to be done. And so we're proposing an independent consultant. Right now, there is money in FY24 budget for an owner's advisor, and what we're talking about doing is rescoping that project. And then there's also money in the FY25 budget to carry on through. So we would not have to do an RFQ, but we would use the consultant that's independent. You've heard me say this before, there is not a do nothing option. The one option that was asked for last meeting was a repair in place, because one of the individuals does not believe that we are giving that fair consideration.
Versus replace in place, just want to be clear, right?
Our concern with repair in place is, those of you who've been on the tour, you've seen the cracks in some of the structures. Those can't be repaired. They got to be replaced. So once you start doing replacement, you invoke the new rules, and that requires additional redundancy and resiliency. And then it becomes a domino effect of, hang on.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me finish. That starts the process with TCQ of, once you start one, you end up going through the entire plant. And one of the issues with repair in place is, if you do something one year and then do something the next year and then the next year, and phase it in, you run the risk of plant upsets. You run the risk of the contractor inadvertently digging something up he wasn't supposed to. You create a problem for the operations to be able to continue to operate while the contractor is working around you. And the other thing is, that's not been talked about a lot, is the piping in that plant is all over the place, and it's old. So the minute you start trying to do some repairs, you could have some of that ductile iron pipe just collapse on you. Because we've had it collapse on us on the force mains outside the plant. It's of the same vintage. So we're willing to do the analysis. Don't get me wrong. We just don't think it's a good use of your money, because you've been advised by Freeze Nichols through this last analysis they did, that anything beyond almost $30 million, you're just throwing money away, because you're going to have to replace the plant someday anyway. So you basically be band-aiding or gaining 10 or 15 years. Now,
So, I mean, just to start off with this, as most of y'all know, I'm not very happy about this. One, looking through the old 10-year plans, there's a lot of these that have a significant remaining useful life left. I would like to see a column on here, and I'm shocked that it was left off there, of what the remaining useful life is on each of these items, and then what the estimated useful life is of the asset that's going to be put in place or reinstalled. I think that's a huge miss on there, but when looking through this, it looks like there's only about 6 or 7 that need to be done in the next 5 or 6 years. So, I don't see the $33 million as being something that's accurate. And maybe it is, maybe it's not, but not from what I've seen, but I would like to see the remaining useful lives put on here when we, need to maintain or replace certain items that we already had in some of the 10-year plans, right? So I would like to see that. I would have thought for the $50,000 we paid for that, we would have gotten more than that. So I'd like to see that. But when it comes to repair and place, I just did a simple search to educate myself on 217. And, what I see is if your facility was approved and built before August 2008 and designed under 30 TAC Chapter 317, follow those rules for operation and maintenance only, not for redesign. But if we're not redesigning, wouldn't we be under 317? Couldn't we just repair and place?
There are some things that you can repair, but there are other things that take the aeration basins. You've got interior walls that are braced. You have cracks in those concrete basins. You have cracks in the clarifier basin.
But we could just replace them.
You start replacing them, that invokes the new the 217.
You're just maintaining, you're not redesigning.
But also you've been told that the clarifiers are undersized for peak flow and that the aeration basins don't take peak flow.
But do we build for peak flow? It's impossible, right?
Yes, sir. It's part of our permit.
So what's the peak flow goal?
Well, the permit is for 18 million gallons today.
And how often do we go over that?
Yeah.
Well, we just did, but how often?
Could be a couple of times a year. We can't predict the rain. But you gotta at least plan for what's in the permit. And then you gotta be able to process the rest of it somehow through the plant without blowing out the top.
I mean, for me, I would like to see, more of like you say, a look into what it costs to maintain our plant. And for me, I would think that maintaining it as, that's part of the management function that you're doing would be replacing aeration basin in 1 and 2. But was 3 and 4 put in to replace 1 and 2? Oh, no, that was all put in at the same time?
That was added capacity.
That, when it was built, all 4 of them were built at the same time?
There were 4 phases of improvements at the plant expansion, and 3 and 4 came in, I guess, around 98 to 2000, somewhere in that time. 1 and 2 were original to the facility.
I still don't see how taking out 1 and 2 and putting the exact same thing in is going to put us into 217. Right, it's not redesigning, it's maintaining what we have.
Require redesigning.
Part of maintaining, I would think, would be, your aeration basin's gone bad, you gotta, put another one in, rip the old one out, put a new one in, not redesign the entire plant.
So with TCQ, if I'm gonna fill some cracks, or I'm gonna do something that's non-structural, not like minor maintenance, right? Replace a few shingles or something, they're fine, you can stick them to 317. But if I have to replace like the center wall, the common wall that's shared around aeration basins 1 and 2, that has to be redesigned for TCEQ and has to go back to them for. So coating, minor cracks, very minor things does not go to TCEQ, but
Plates of the aerators.
yeah,
Clarifier
fighting aerators, all that stuff, gear drives and everything does not go to TCEQ. But if I have to remove that entire unit and put something new back in, it has to go to them for approval, which then means it has to be 217.
Which may mean adding additional basins because of their redundancy.
Oh, we're continuing on with getting the property, right?
Yes.
So, I mean,
The energy business, Brad, deals with this all the time, forever, and constantly, whether you're looking at a refinery or processing plant, whatever it might be. And we live this in spades, what you're talking about. And they've got it right. I mean, the intent of the regulation is very clear of what they're trying to do and triggers all kinds of things in big processes. In a refinery, you can kind of cordon off one process and say, I'm just doing the hydrotreater. So that's all I'm doing. And yeah, I get hit with all those pieces. but it slowly trickles through the whole facility if you're not careful. I like what you guys have proposed here. I don't know about the repair in place. I mean, I think that just kicks the can down the road, to be honest with you. But that's, and I don't know if we're gonna, I don't know if this is the place to probably determine that or vet that. Appreciate your comments. I think it's good for us to be knowledgeable. I really like now that we have some choices. And I think that's what you've done. You've given us some alternatives that we can say are apples to apples to apples. We can do pros and cons. We can have an expensive version, a medium version, conventional technology, new technology, and all those pieces in front of us. And that gives us, I think, something that we would need to go to our residents and talk to them as we communicate with them over the next year and saying, here's what we're faced with. And if somebody wants to kind of go down the repair and replace version, well, then, that's something else again in my mind. But to me, the proper thing to do to look 50 years down the road is to figure out how to get this thing into a 50-year life, not a 10-year life increments going down, which means we're repairing and replacing forever, which means you're always doing SIMOPS, which is operating and constructing at the same time. And you're triggering new regulations every time you go open something up. And it's the death knell for a big process facility. That's what we've learned in the energy business, even in Texas. Now go to other states and it's even worse. Texas is kind of the best in the whole country. Do this in California.
No, thanks.
Right. It's a whole new world. So that's been my background, my experience with very, very complicated processes, but the same rules in Texas apply to whether it's, water or gasoline or diesel.
And like I said, we're happy if this board says we want to do repair in place, that needs to be passed up to the trustees so that they can direct us to include this in the scope and get on down the road.
Well,
It's a
I watched
strategic decision. I think that's a strategic decision more than an economic one.
I watched the trustee meeting and I think you said something about the way you wanted to compare it was replacing everything all at once.
Right.
Why wouldn't you do individually, as things come up on the remaining useful life?
Mainly because it gets back to David Munn's analysis that you don't agree with, that it's more expensive. And it's a
Well, I'm
waste.
sure it will be if you do it all at once.
Well, no, if you do it piece by piece by piece by piece over years, it's going to be more expensive and more, as Hugh said, more potential for operational failure and violation. Because the value of money changes annually. The cost of construction changes annually. And just doing, I'm not talking about the little mechanical change out of
Yeah,
pump
like a
here, there.
pump.
I'm talking about piping, I'm talking electrical, the motor control centers, I'm talking about the concrete basins. That once you get into it, you're committed. And then to replace the aeration, you almost have to bring in additional tankage to be able to construct the basins and still stay operational. Same thing with clarifiers.
I mean, they're not using them now. Right? 1 and 2.
They're not currently in use, that can go in use. The concern is, at least from the operations side, if you take 1 and 2, like you take them out of the ground, you've got a big hole in the ground. 3 and 4, occasionally, the next 2 basins occasionally do need to go down for routine maintenance. One has void in the wall. Concern from our side is if I lose either one of those basins in the year and a half or so it takes to design and put in another 2, I literally have nothing else to do with the sewage and has to back up in the system. That's where the additional tankage comes in. So if we're replacing 1 and 2, I need some additional standby tankage there just in case 3 and 4 goes down.
And didn't you have a small one out there right now? Up on the hill? A small storage tank?
We have a thickener that's decommissioned.
And not the one that was kind of like if you're going up the hill towards 1 and 2, and it was like it would be over here and then up on the hill would be the little storage and one of those little storage.
Yeah,
That was a thing? Okay.
yeah, round thing.
There's so many things out there. I can't keep them all straight.
The thickener's been decommissioned for years. It's an old process, haven't been used. So we can be that in the new plan, existing plan.
Well, if I remember, the thickener was before you got up to 1 and 2.
Yeah, once you go up to the hill, if you're looking at the back gate, on your right-hand side is going to be aeration basins 1 and 2. On your left-hand side is going to be the grit removal system. So it is a tank, but the water just comes in, gets the grit out, then it goes to the aeration basins. There's a small tank up there for some, basically milk and magnesia, but there's no additional storage on the left hand side.
So Ed, I have a question on the independent consultant
Yes.
side. How would you like select that? You said the bidding's not required, but so maybe share a little thoughts around
Well,
that.
We have a contract with the firm that's been, we brought them in as owners with the idea that we were going to see more. And now that we're stepping back and taking a look, we would redirect that firm's scope of search to do this work. They've not been involved in the strategic plan. The thing we've got to look at is the firm has to have CMAR experience. They have to have competitive seal proposal experience. They have to have conventional treatment design experience. And they've got to have MBR design experience to be able to effectively do this analysis. And so this firm happens to have that experience. So the idea would be we would use them.
And are they the best?
They are in the top 3 of being the best.
How do you rank them?
This is a national firm that does nothing but water, wastewater. And put them up against HTR, put them up against Black and Beach, other national firms that do this type of work. Freeze Nichols does this type of work, but they've been used through the strategic plan. There might, Connie, there one other firm, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, so just to go back to the question at hand of like how this particular firm was selected, we did do an RFQ in the fall for that owner's advisor role. And that particularly required somebody who had that skill set. And so we actually went through a process where we scored them. There was a selection committee that had some of our operators as well as our engineers. And we walked through that process and we had interviews with 3 different firms that were national firms who had experience in CMAR, CSP, your membranes, your conventional, and just really a lot of very technical knowledge of the industry, as well as could bring us the ideas and the thoughts from across the nation to help us as an extension to double check whoever was going to do the design. We don't have that expertise on staff. And so this firm was brought in, and so that was where that selection was made. And quite frankly, they were the most qualified and that was presented to us.
And then are they independent?
Yes.
The other thought I had, so MBR technology, a little different process and training and learning, and it's not conventional. When you look at your manpower needs and obviously your operating costs, I assume there'll be some consideration that your new technology needs new training, new expertise that
We
you
would
probably didn't have. That
There's
there's
make certain that cost, that initial cost, of
Yeah.
training,
gets built in.
because any new plant, whether it's MBR or whether it's conventional, is going to have new electronics, new SCADA.
Yep.
And
The new
there's gonna
stuff.
need to be a commissioning of the plant.
Mhm.
There's still going to be the need for training. You know, the process may be something they're very familiar with, but it's different than the old plant. So, yeah, we've been asked, well, what's this going to cost? We don't know because we have not gone and gotten a proposal. We wanted to make certain we had kind of an approval from the trustees to move forward. So our ask of you tonight is talk amongst yourself, because this is not an action item, to direct your trustee on how to vote when this agenda item shows up on the trustee agenda, on whether to move forward or add something to the feasibility, or shut it down and live with what we got. But again, we do not have a do nothing option.
Okay. Is that coming up in July? Is that the plan?
That's the plan.
And we also don't have a repair in place option.
Well,
That's what we're
and
just
so
Yeah.
if that's something that you all are interested in doing, make certain that when the trustees vote, they either add it or don't.
I mean, I would like to see it just so we have something to benchmark on, you know.
Well,
It's
the
risky.
analysis we just did, which was essentially going the next only 18 months, which I'm not sure why you don't believe what they did. They looked at the equipment that needed the most work out there. In fact, there's a report that has the useful life of every single major piece of system out there.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're repairing things that don't need to be replaced. So this doesn't seem to make sense to me. It
But that was supposed to get us 6.5 years.
was up to 5, I
Well,
think is
it
what.
was a
what
year and a
the plan
half
was.
and then 5 on top of that. Isn't that right?
There was-
Basically get us. to
There's 2 tranches.
There were 2 lists. One got us to 2030, one got us to 2033.
So I said 5 years. So that's kind of the kicking the can thing. So we have that analysis and that becomes back economic more than anything. I don't have any reason to believe because you could square up that list there with a technical report that was done summarizing all wastewater treatment plant and useful life that was estimated across 10 major systems. And you can kind of tick and tie what needs to be done. It's not all, wasn't all in that major report, but it's clearly the big pieces are there. Be it the generator, be it the clarifier, be it the lift works, be it whatever it is, right? So we've spent some money and time doing that. I don't know why we would continue to want to keep going down that path when we have 3 other, I think, more strategic options. So to me, you're really making a decision saying, I don't want to have a strategic plan that's going to give me 50 years of life. I want something that's going to let me roll 5 years at a time.
Right.
And be continually building and operating and repairing continuously, essentially, is what you're going to kind of committing the operation to. That's what it looks like to me.
Well, I don't want to go 5 years, obviously, and I don't think this will only get us 5 years, but I would like to get us at least another 15, 20, maybe 25 years to maybe we have a better time. I mean, this community can't afford a $300 million project, in my opinion. Our water rates go up. I want to get with you to talk about that graph you had in the Woodlands water meeting where you had, the 104 versus the 120 of Houston. And so I'd like to go over some of those numbers with you at some point.
Sure.
But, I would like to get to a better point. We're in the period of the highest, inflation that we've probably seen in our lifetimes, very high interest rates. I definitely am not interested in indebting our community to this $700 million, right? At the total bond write-off, if I remember correctly.
570.
590. Well, I keep hearing all these different numbers, Eric.
There's only one.
Yeah.
People keep spreading different numbers.
Yes.
So
They're all in the report.
even still, I mean, I think we should look at some of the economics of what's going on and what's predicted through an economist.
Oh, if you have a good beat on interest rates, that'd be great.
Yeah,
I'd love to know that, what that looks like.
Can't
And
predict the market.
inflation, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if we're gonna solve this. I think you're putting a proposal in front of us. You put it in front of all the MUDs. It's gonna go to the trustees to say, do you want to take on this next body of work? It's what we were talking about when we were looking at the supplement agreement, essentially, with a repair in place. With a replace in place. That was kind of the ask, say, hey, can you take some money out of this thing and just deal with what you have now without buying new land, right? That's kind of that option, as well as bringing conventional up side by side with MBR and now replace in place. We were going down that path with our supplement essentially.
Mhm.
And so it seems like we've got kind of the rest of the crowd there, at least most of it, at least that's what you're proposing. And we'll decide how the trustees go down that path and see what they think.
One other quick thing, the next agenda item, which discusses the supplemental agreement, we're asking the MUDs to basically put that on hold or rescind your vote, because if this feasibility study, if it's approved, it takes 6 to 8 months to accomplish. We can come out with a different path than what's identified in that supplemental agreement. So might as well just set it aside.
So the money, the 40 million of the supplement, that's off the table
Well,
for now.
in our minds, it needs to be put on pause.
Yeah.
Because we don't need that to get this feasibility done.
So if trustees next month approve the 3 bulleted plan that SJR has put together, the independent third party starts that 6 to 9 months, we get some proposal.
You'll get a report with a recommendation from us on what we think is the best option to go forward.
Sounds great.
So one thing is that, and I like the idea of doing a feasibility study of what's behind door number 1, door number 2, and door number 3. And these are all things that I think it's important to just get it down to, boil it down to things that our constituents can understand. But I'm wondering if there is a way, and I don't know how to do this, that we could look at an outside force, like maybe something that the Environmental Protection Agency, I know by 2029, they're getting really, really ramped up on the amount of PFAS that would be allowed in the water system and that. And just doing some research found that there's high levels like up in the Huntsville area and over in Lake Livingston. And I think the more that our citizens will become aware of just, this is like a forever chemical and what it can do in terms of women that are pregnant and the diseases that it can cause, is that it's probably going to start to hit on everybody's radar, let alone the Environmental Protection Agency putting that 2029, which is like 5 years away, to be able to, what is the minimum standard and whatever. If we're going to go through the expense of evaluating new technologies going forward, is there a way that within these studies could be also addressed things that would be government regulations that we might see coming down the pike?
That would be addressed during the design phase,
Okay.
because that's when you would be designing facility to, I'll say, eliminate or take those things out of the wastewater before it's
Right.
back in the stream bed.
So the EPA just came out with their new, I guess their
Guidelines, the rules.
right?
Rules,
That-
yeah.
The measurement levels, that's applied to the freshwater side or the wastewater side or both? Does your wastewater
It
have to
said the
achieve it?
affluents.
Does it have to,
I was under the understanding it was freshwater.
Not to say that it won't end up at the treatment plant, but it
Yeah.
well could.
Now, see, in the case, in our case, we go through the GRP, our surface water goes through the GRP, that is membrane, and our filters will strip almost everything out. So I'm not worried about your drinking water. It's whatever gets into the sewer from what might be happening inside the household.
Well, other people flushing contact lenses down the toilet too. I mean, that's pure PFAS.
And so that's why I say eliminating that during the treatment process would occur during the design phase.
Okay. Okay.
Because
yeah, I understand what you're saying. though.
No, I mean, it's just
Yeah, you hate to build
because,
all this and go, oh gee, we missed the.
really, and then the Environmental Protection Agency comes down with all these fines and that, and I was like, well, why didn't we think about that 5 years ago? So if we're going to spend the money to do a feasibility study behind door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3, well, what is the Environmental Protection Agency, since we know that this is on their radar, their next 5-year, radar going forward. And it's something that if they're making noise about it, our constituents are going to know about it. And we've got to have an answer.
What I think you just said is that the
Design
design
phase.
would kind of meet future PFAS requirements, would have some expectation there. Is that what I think you just said, right?
Yes.
That's
Okay.
on any of the designs, right? One might be better or worse or whatever.
Okay.
And, take it the next step further, not to belabor the point. If we went conventional, you could always add in a process unit to deal with a specific PFAS
Right.
Or-
But that's an added cost.
at the time that it's
Yeah.
required.
Right.
And you can't do an add-on on MBR?
You can,
Oh, okay.
well.
Well, the feasibility study, would it tell us all this, that the add-on
because-
possibility?
because the Technology would let you make. I'm sorry, Dan.
No, I say, but in the feasibility study, I mean, if there was an add-on that we needed,
That
if
would be
we,
identified
it
in the
would-
50-year horizon.
okay, good. Okay, I would love that. Yes.
So since we deferred the supplement,
We don't
we're
care.
actually working on modifying or marking it up. Spent a lot of time doing that, by the way.
I'm sorry.
Well,
But I have all your
it'll
notes,
show
Bill.
up
I have your
I was
notes.
getting these messages telepathically, and so I thought, I'll just send
See all
it.
that red ink? Is it coming out?
I did want to address that.
Yeah,
Because I think the comments that this board came up with were very good. In fact, I felt like if it continued on with the other MUDs, with the original plan, that the other MUDs would probably adopt the same comments. So y'all were kind of at the forefront of that. I think this gives us the opportunity to, use that the next 6 to 8 months to dig even deeper. Now,
Yeah.
granted, we don't know what the eventual thing will be necessarily, but there were a lot of other comments that y'all made within that document that weren't specific to
Yeah.
MBR.
Yeah,
There
it's like
were
the
other
exhibit, the project is exhibit A and B kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there were other aspects that you commented on that I think could probably translate forward into whatever new agreement might be needed down the road. That's all I'm saying.
Continue to evolve it as to meet the right timeline, right? Yeah.
Correct.
One final thing, you have this document in front of you. This is an update on the land acquisition for water reclamation phase number 1. We are still getting surveys. We're still doing phase 1's site assessments. We're still talking to landowners about getting access to properties. We have done no appraisals and we have made no offers on properties. The tracks in blue are the ones that we are identifying initially. The ones in green are these tracks we'd like to have for a buffer. They're in the floodplain, but right now the values are coming in above our budget. And it's shocking what people think they can get for floodplain property. But you'll get you'll get a report like this each month on the status. Awesome. The one thing that one of the directors asked last meeting was to put in there what our budget is and how much has been spent. So we can do that pretty easily. So any final questions on item 13? Excuse me. I was hoping we were further down the agenda.
I guess I just have one question that really just clarifying, because in the SJRA meeting, and now I've gone back and it has to do with Connie, because you left her high and dry Friday afternoon. And so,
Dennis was.
you remember that, Connie?
I distinctly recall that, yes.
So I asked what the $288 million, what was the age on that number? And I think Chris and Connie, if I remember correctly, conferred, and they said, I think it was February 2023. And I was like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. And then later on, I thought about it. I was like, that had to have been a mistake, but you guys talked about it. Is that right?
I don't remember that, but that number was late 23, correct?
Yeah, I thought it was like December 23, but that day you had said February, and I was thinking, was that just a mistake?
Would have been late 23 because the master plan final report came out in March.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was thinking.
So the numbers may be 6 or 7 months old.
Yeah, it might have just been a mistake, but you remember when we were talking about
Yeah, I
that?
do recall it. I feel like I stare at that tile just a little bit longer. I think. But no, I think that you're right on that. And so, let me go back and look at it and let me get Eric a response on that, specifically of what those answers are, because I think I was struggling to understand if the question was, is it, today's dollars or?
Well, I was just thinking if you use that number for the sensitivity analysis,
Right.
net present value, that's where it kind of blew my mind that we were at the end of the day, but I was thinking, what?
I think your question was, once again, let's talk afterwards and let me
Sure.
make sure that I understand so that we can get you a true response to that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think now that I had time to think about it after that meeting, I was like, that doesn't make me, it had to have been December-ish of
Yeah.
2023, not
Right.
the beginning of the year.
If there's methylation and stuff that's in that number, that 288 million that we're throwing out there, I think your concern was that it's just going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And then 6 months, 8 months, I mean, yes, all that's true, that there's, that number was about 4 to 6 months old.
Okay. Yeah, well, I thought when we were talking, it was like a year and a half, and I was like, wait a second.
No.
So,
So I
yeah,
probably gave you the wrong.
yeah, that's what I think. So, yeah, I think I'm good.
Anything else on that topic? Okay. Good discussion. Thank you. So just to be clear, at the trustee meeting in July, I will be supporting the recommendation to proceed with the 3. If the 4th comes up and gets some traction, that'll probably maybe an audible that's called during the meeting.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I was just thinking if we did that, at least when because, we have to talk to the residents, right? And they're going to want answers, obviously. And I know we have a communications committee, but, hey, when I'm out there talking to residents and they're asking me questions, I'm not saying, go talk to the communications committee. We're going to have to answer, and it would be nice if we had some data so we could show that, what the cost would be if we did repair and maintain what we had.
Well, I think you need to get comfortable with the analysis that was done and maybe tick and tie that back to the
Yeah.
technical report that's done in February of this year.
Yeah.
And convince yourself or not that, that analysis lends to an uneconomic decision and has a different strategic kind of outcome. And I think that's, if you can square that up, then I think you can have a pretty decent conversation.
Yeah.
If you don't support that, then you have a different conversation, I guess.
Maybe I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. So that gets us
Number
through
12.
to 12. Yes, thank you. Woodlands Division.
So the Woodlands Division budget was presented last month. Nothing has changed. There's still the wholesale water rate is being reduced by 2%. Wholesale wastewater is staying the same. GRP rates going down about 7%. So this month is basically, if you have any questions, next month is when the MUDS Board Director Trustee had a vote at the August meeting. Are you thinking if you have any questions on the Woodlands Division budget? I know that Jamie does have the Bear Branch budget.
Place, you'll have handed out some paper before the meeting started. The first one is the draft budget for Bear Branch. And then the second sheet is the spent allocation contribution by MUD. So in the budget, this is for the ongoing maintenance and operations for the Bear Branch Reservoir and the flowage easement. So the operating agreement with the River Authority is for the Lake Conroe Division to provide that operations and maintenance at the dam there, as well as the maintenance around the flowage easement. And this provides the funds to be able to continue that operations. It also includes the ongoing project that's partially funded by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the contribution that would be needed for cash contributions from the 5 MUDs that are in for that project above the Army Corps of Engineers funds. So this year's contributions are about $76,000 lower for the whole collective 5 MUDs, and then y'all's MUD is $38,373 lower than last year. So unless y'all have any questions, I could go into more detail.
Where does that $38,000 show up from?
I'm just doing that out of math on my head. I
Okay.
have,
Okay.
last year's contribution was 901,000.
Okay, there you
And
go.
then this year's 825, and so I took the percentage of y'all's contribution, and that's the 38,000.
And among the MUDs, remind me, I know I asked this, I think now third time in a year in a row, how is it divided among the MUDs?
Based on y'all, SFDUEs for the,
It's all SFDUE.
SFDUEs that drain to Bear Branch.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's 67 is the largest player in that at 60 some odd percent, I think 62%. So you'll hear next about a project that's specific to Bear Panther.
Well, we have the most residents in the back of MUD 47 that are flowing to the south into that reservoir.
15%.
Yeah, on emphasis that, yeah, that on this.
Yeah.
50% there, right?
Right.
So what was 67? What were you saying? Sorry.
I misspoke. You'll hear about it in a second.
Okay. Any questions for Jamie on that? Okay. Okay, so I guess we're on to item 13, update on the Bear Branch drainage improvement project.
Yeah, so
Happening there.
that's where I was getting ahead of myself.
Okay.
A few years ago, you may recall, and you are a stakeholder in this, a drainage study that was started with the idea that it could help improve the drainage situation around the research forest from Gotham to the high school roughly. Of the woodlands, which fared very well during floods, except for Creekside that had issues in Harvey. But one of the other kind of known, I'll call it hotspots, is the area I just mentioned, kind of research Gosling High School, both north and south of the high school, a little bit west. This study was started a few years ago with the intention to, number one, find out if that drainage situation could be improved, and specifically to lower the water surface elevation in that area, and particularly on Research Forest, because during some of the heavier events, Taxi Memorial Day, Harvey, the emergency vehicles cannot get through on Research in that immediate area. So they've been doing the study for the last, it's probably been a year and a half, 2 years. The results of that study started to come about the last month or so, or last couple months, and then an updated cost estimate was developed. And we met last week or so to kind of go through the update on this. And I said, well, I think it's time to bring it back to the stakeholder MUDs to get an update on, a little how we got here. What does the study include? Where's the current cost estimate? The funding for the project that you have in place at the moment is about $11.3 million. Part of that is cash from the MUDs, no interest loans on some debt that's 67, I think 6 point, Brian, I don't know if it was at 6.7, 6.
You know what, the,
6.5 million for MUD 67, and a no interest loan. And then there's a small grant for about $1 million or so. So all that adds up to about 11.3. And that's what's currently what was anticipated many years ago before, when the grants and the evaluation was started. So with that, I asked Donnie and LJ to come in and give us an update on where we are.
Right now, our contribution to that was about $1 million.
Don't recall.
47 was 1.6 million, and on a percentage basis, you are 15.16% of the project.
67 is the 62% that I mentioned a minute ago out of line.
Okay.
On this
part. So we have the same SFDUA kind of approach, but different homes going to it. Okay.
How often do they reevaluate those? The SFDUs?
SFDUs, that's a whole nother discussion we get into.
Yeah, that's.
I didn't know if it was like every 5 or 10 years.
No, I mean, the last sixth and final was in 2017.
Used to be every 5 years, and then the last one was it 2016, 17? Yeah,
As development slide.
correct.
It's a 10-year look. I think it was forecasting to 2027.
Right.
Let's go.
Hi, I'm Donnie Reed, LJA. We're the engineer that did the original model, did the new model. As you know, the Woodlands developed back in the 70s and 80s, and we did the drainage model at that point in time. And that's the model we've been working on for the past 40 years. Every time there's an event that comes through, Woodlands Water would come to us. We'd look at that old model, run some analysis, and move forward with whatever drainage improvements we saw. As you know, in 16, we had the tax day, and then shortly thereafter, there was the Memorial Day event that came through. I was talking with one of my guys before I came up here today, and he reminded me that in 15, there was also a Memorial Day event. So, you had 15, you had an event, then you come back a year later, you had tax day, and then Memorial Day for the month apart. Woodlands Water came to us and said, hey, what's going on? We put all that data into our models. The model is functioning as it was originally designed, but they said, hey, we've got some water ponding and flooding in some areas. What can we do? Combined, MUD's probably spent $1 million plus in drainage improvements throughout the woodlands, expanding inlets, cutting curbs down, opening up the back of curbs, putting drainage swells, doing all sorts of improvements to help water get out of the streets and potentially flooding some homes. The big area that was flooding, as Eric said, the high school had a bunch of flooding, Research Forest, Capstone, Twinberry area, primarily in Mud 67. We went and looked at several different options, what we could do, which I talked about, inlets, swells and everything. Came up with nothing, found out that Bear Branch and Panther Branch is mainly the cause. Once water's up there, it doesn't matter what improvements you do anywhere else, there's nowhere for water to go. So at that point in time, we started looking at what we can do to Bear Branch to improve. Working off that old model, we looked at several different options that didn't take too much time to really get into based on the old models, and basically came up with this solution, which was doing some improvements on Bear Branch from basically the high school, just a little bit further up from high school down to Gosling, and then from Gosling going back up Panther some distance as well, doing some some excavation in the ditch and doing some underbrushing as well. And what that's going to do is get water moving faster down. Well, once you get water moving faster, you got to slow it down, or that water is going to impact people downstream. So we came up with, this preliminary design, came up with detention ponds that you see at Gosling. You see that in one of your exhibits, the original exhibit that was done back in 17. Preliminary ideas of where it was going to be. So at that point in time, we started looking at funding options when we got with the general manager at the time and looked at where we could get funding. Looked at all sorts of different places. The Water Development Board became an option to look at, applied for that, and sure enough, we got a approval to go with that. The whole time we knew that one of the main things we need to do was get an updated model. We need to get one that agencies and just analysis would give us better data of what it was than the model that was prepared back in the 80s. So once we got the approval, got to go, we've built this model, and that's what we built over the last several months of getting that together. So the good news is right now, the Woodlands has a updated working functional model that meets criteria for all your agencies that you'd be dealing with, that goes from 1488 all the way south to Spring Creek, and from 2978 on Bear Branch, where it ties into Panther Branch. So you have a functioning model that works. Then what we did is, now that we got the model, we took that data from the tax day, which was the biggest event. I think it was tax day, it was the biggest event. And we put that in and ran and said, what do we need to do to get these reductions that we had from the original analysis that we had? From that, we need to increase our detention ponds a little bit. We need to do a little bit more excavation. And so our cost estimate went up roughly about $6 to $8 million for construction. And that's just based on preliminary numbers going through it. We'd have to get into more design to get a better accurate number. But that's $6 or $8 million more than what we initially had intended. So like I said, Eric wanted me to come here and kind of give a little update of where we were, how we got to this point, where we started from, because there's some history of what we were doing and trying to get there. From having a new model. The other thing I want to bring up is that, at the time, we only had just so much money, so much time to be able to get the grant application in, that we only looked at just a few options. Is there a few more options that may be feasible for, reducing this water? Maybe so. One of my biggest things is we've got two big detention ponds that are going to be right at Gosling Road. As you drive across Gosling Road, you're going to see two big detention ponds that you don't see right now. Historically, Woodlands residents don't like a bunch of trees in areas that are very visible being knocked down. And so we wanted to say, I just want to present that information. And at the time, like I said, we just looked at what the best option was to reduce the area of detention, or area of drainage that we had. So that's kind of where I've got. That was kind of a quick summary.
Yeah.
I'd like to say this about that area. If you look at the high school property, which is lighter purple, kind of in the center of the map, and you move up from there, that's Twinberry runs parallel to Research on the north side of Research, and that's Cat's Cradle that goes up perpendicular to Research. And if you cross through that, going from northwest to south, going from northeast to southwest, you've got that Panther Branch fault in there. And what is a fact is that running along Research, you have elevation measurements that are constantly being taken of subsidence in that area. And they will show you that right there outside the high school, it's sinking faster than the land to the east and to the west of that intersection I just showed you. So this problem keeps getting worse. And our rescue vehicles they have, how big are the tires? I know they're at least a couple of feet high. They can't cross research. That's a big deal. Our high water rescue vehicles can't cross that. So it's just getting worse as every year goes by. That's all.
So after I kind of sat through the updates that you just heard a few weeks ago, I kind of came to the conclusion of a couple different options that we have. Knowing that, you know, the cost has gone up beyond the money that we have. We can call it quits and move on. We can find the money. I didn't feel at the magnitude of the delta that the MUDs would want to quickly entertain just making up, even if everybody shares still. It's still looking at, you know, $6-8 million in addition. So coincidentally, we've also started up this One Water Task Force that we've only just begun the last month or so. I thought, and the group is eager to find a project to run with. And I thought perhaps there would be some energy around through that task force to identify and really get all the stakeholders together, not just the MUDs, but you're talking about maybe Howard Hughes, the township, the precinct, some Fed dollars, some state dollars, and kind of get, I mean, this project, as you mentioned, is good for the community. This is one of our, I call it a hotspot, you know, that we go and check when the rains are heavy, you know, because we know what the history is in that region. And so this particular project lowers that water surface elevation by almost 2 feet, which is pretty significant, which should help the ingress egress, at least for those storms that it was modeled after. So that was one of the thoughts I had. I brought that to the attention recently of the One Water Group, and we've invited some legislature representatives to that meeting, and they indicated that it might be a starter. It might work. There might be some money somewhere. So that would be option 2. Option 3 would really be what Don mentioned at the end, which is kind of, now that the model's done, see if there's another option somewhere that's cheaper and gets us, you know, partially the same result. I'm not sure that there's a silver bullet there that would, you know, that is an alternative that's a bunch cheaper necessarily, or would work as good. I don't know, but so the way I see it, that's kind of the 3 options. There's no action to take tonight. It was just more of an update. I am proceeding at least with discussions with the One Water Group to see if there's any way that we can maybe go down that route to start with. See if we can find some.
There are some township directors on that task force. I mean, the Woodlands Township should have a vested interest, especially in these detention ponds, of keeping a buffer or something, because if you mow down the trees, there's going to be a lot of complaints. So getting their buy-in from the township, they've got extra money. I think
It's pretty visible stuff. It's pretty visible too, right? I mean,
What's that?
the soccer field's getting flooded, and I mean, all this happening is very much in the front of everyone. It's not way back in, you know, the woods somewhere.
like the soccer fields they just built downstream from these future detention ponds, you know, by the park and ride.
Yeah.
So the ask is for $8 million more? That's what?
Well,
Is that what I heard?
I mean,
No, so we updated our analysis and we basically came up with, you know, the next phase of saying, hey, what we initially had was, you know, $10 million construction costs, you know, with engineering and everything else was 11.3, but 10 million of construction. And now we're saying roughly, you know, 16 to 18 million is what we're saying now. So $6 to $8 million more based upon our, you know, our first run at this, you know, hey, we want to present that, you know, to y'all. And I knew the SJ asked, you know, that we can kind of present that. You know, we need to, you know, run some more analysis, you know, look at some design and see some things to get a better cost estimate, you know, to get to that, because, you know, that number may go down, may go up a little bit. But, you know, we wanted to present that now, hey, here's where we're at to let y'all know. To give you
Could you do just bite-sized pieces? Maybe you got half of a detention pond. You gotta do it all.
yeah, we looked at that. I mean, it's not a direct relationship, but basically you get half the benefit, and half the benefit still doesn't let cars pass through.
Mm.
So you really need, and that was one of the other things is originally it was like, well, maybe if we could get 3 or 4 feet, but at least a couple feet lower in that water surface elevation, that would really help ingress egress. Once they were able to, because actually, I don't know if you recall this, but we were talking about presenting this back the end of last year. So the original run through the models were only giving us about a foot or so. And we said, that's not going to do it. Let's dig a little deeper on the models. They went back, adjusted some things, found some other ways to get some more benefit. And so they've really worked hard to get to that 2 foot mark of water surface drop. Does that make sense?
So we need to come up with the money for this, for the with the.
If we want to do this,
That should have an impact.
It's a really big deal. You mentioned there was an experiment in, if you will, in real life. The TxDOT wanted to put detention ponds along 242. And what that means is taking down trees, and people don't want to look at a detention pond. So what would it be to cover that up in a way? Put trees, can we make it a park? Let's continue that.
We need to get Dr. Shelley involved because she led the fight with
Right.
TxDOT.
That's right. So,
yeah, the dilemma is you can't achieve the drop in water surface elevation without some areas. More of it is underbrushing. There is some clearing, and so underbrushing is obviously different than tree clearing, right? You're doing the yopon and but a lot of people associate that with kind of the buffer because of your eyes can't see through the junk stuff, so people still.
It's considered green belt.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So it's still, rubs people, but there's a decision that's going to have to be made. You want to address the drainage or you want to undercut some trees?
Is it?
You either do or you don't.
Is it safe to assume that as West County and there's more development, do these branches start to fill up even more in 10 or 20 years?
more subsidence, I think both.
I mean, I assume if there's more concrete, on the other side of the woodlands.
Well, I mean, as the flow that comes into the woodlands should be regulated by the county of, hey, there was only X coming in and only X coming in. So, they concrete everything in, they need to detain to only allow what's coming in. And that's it.
So we should count on the county not really protecting our interests because they really don't.
Yeah, they won't. So, well, they haven't in the past. It's a new administration.
Eric, I like your idea of going to the, task force, the One Water. I think it's a kind of a committee looking for a project, and here's a pretty good one. Right? Because the detention ponds would be located in what mud they are in.
Yeah, at the northeast intersection of Gosling and
Maybe 46
Across the street from
the purple.
or 47, I mean.
the two, look at this map.
Map up here on the wall. We could do.
It's behind the Lone Star headquarters.
Yep, there you go. Yep, you're right. Find Gosling. Yep.
Oh, it is, you're right. It's between research and over here.
To be maybe a little bit of a Debbie Downer and just point some, I know, I'm so sorry. Some other numbers out that are on your sheet. So there's some other things to consider that we haven't really talked about. So Donnie's not talked about the Army Corps, but there is some potential for these to be categorized as well. They were, essentially that would add in 40-something million in mitigation costs, which would kill the project, right? So that's the Corps' way of going, you don't get to do this, right? So we want to caveat that I think LJ has had some conversations with the Corps preliminarily, but depending on who sits at the Capitol, somewhere else, that can determine what the Army Corps does and doesn't say is wetlands. So please be aware of that. There's other utilities that have to consider that may have to be relocated. It could increase the cost. So what I think I want to make sure that y'all are aware of is that 6 to 8 million additional. Just be aware that's the basis for kind of the earthwork and the clearing, right? So if there's other things that are necessary when you're doing modeling, like H&H modeling, like Donnie's done, it's not really to the design level, like what we're talking about with some of the treatment facilities and things. So be aware there's contingency, but there could be some other whammies that we're not quite sure of, okay? So I want to clear, the mitigation is your big wide whammy that's on your sheet. That's the number.
But you have 82 million on there, which you see, there's a big bold number, says 82. That is because if the court comes back, I've talked with them, and they come back and say, no, you're touching wetlands, you need to have credits, you need to buy credits. It's gonna build the project. And so that number on there is like 49 million is what I said. It's a big number, it's a scary number, because they come back and say that, I mean.
Did MUD 67 already sell the bond
That's
in order to get the grant money, right?
Well, in order to get the zero interest loan and to be able to put up their portion of the overall project, so everybody else put up in cash.
So continuing conversations make sense, but I just want to make sure that we're clear on that those numbers are in your head, that there is an outside chance, and I don't want y'all to get out there and be like, you said it was 6 million.
Well, and that brings up a point. We do need to move forward with a little bit more refined, actually get into design that will refine those numbers. In the meantime, the number that I was using when we just had the initial discussion was more like we need 15 to 20. Just so we can, have some contingency in my mind that I don't want to ask for 6 when I really end up needing 12 more. So I'd rather just say 20 until, I can get a little bit more refined numbers. Cause it's just kind of a dart right now anyway. It's just a swag at this point on best guess of the information that we have. So there's no action to be taken. I'll kind of move in that.
Can these documents be put on the Google Drive at some point? Thank you.
It looked to me like it was Metro. It looked to me like it was more Metro.
And they are.
Yeah.
Even though.
Okay. Thanks everyone on that. Connie, thanks for your comments.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, hey, eyes wide open,
Forewarned is forearmed.
eyes wide open. Okay, we're going to item 14, regarding Lake Conroe management.
Yes, Brett Riley has a presentation to talk to you through, and I believe you all had requested somebody to come in and talk to you about Lake Conroe operation. Brett is our Lake Conroe Division Manager.
Brett Riley, nice to meet you. First time I'm here for you. I understand there was a request, so I've got a high level overview at your place of operations at Lake Conroe Dam. Go ahead and flip to the second page, which is the second slide there. There's a couple of key points that I hope you'll walk away with. Number one is always that in operating the dam, it's about protecting dam safety. It's not about flows upstream or flows downstream. It's about protecting the structural integrity of the dam. That's number one, always. And in doing so, we protect critical water supplies while protecting precious life, which I'll go into a little bit on the next slide. So the third slide and the fourth slide are just basic information to give you a perspective. So TCEQ, which is responsible for regulating dam safety in Texas, classifies dams by size category, and they classify them by hazard category. And so as far as size goes, I went ahead and included Bear Branch just for reference, but Lake Conroe is considered a large dam. Bear Branch is considered an intermediate sized dam. If you flip the page, and that's based on either impoundment, maximum impoundment, or the height of the dam. The larger of the two. If you flip the page to the fourth slide, the hazard classification, both dams are high hazard. And the significance of that is there's an anticipated loss of life of 7 or more lives, loss of 3 or more habitable structures, and excessive economic loss. So, but what I want to stress is that on a dam like Lake Conroe, it's much more than that. And so a breach in the Lake Conroe Dam, a breach in either dam, but a breach in the Lake Conroe Dam is very, very significant. Hence, going back to the reason why protecting the dam is number one. Go to slide 5. How do we do that? first and foremost, by abiding by our operations policy, our gate operations policy. The gate operations policy allows us to do a couple of things. Number one, the dam was designed to pass what they call the probable maximum flood. And I can't define it for you. I can tell you it's the theoretical biggest rainstorm they can think of, which today makes me go, yeah, all right. But at the time, and so the dam is required to pass 100% of the probable maximum flood. And it does have a quantitative amount. By abiding by the gate ops, we are always on track to pass the probable maximum flood because you don't know you're in it until you're in it. And so you can't get behind. You need to stay in accordance with your gate ops so that you can do that in the event that event has come. Another thing that our gate operations policy allows us to do is ensure that the peak outflow is only a percentage of the peak inflow into Lake Conroe. And that's key. That's critical. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute, but say it again. The peak outflow from Lake Conroe is less than the percentage of the peak inflow into the dam. Sorry. So you want to let out less than you let in, and there's a significance to that. How else do we do that? The gate ops ensures that we won't overtop our spillway gates. I'm going to show you something in a moment that shows why that's important. And then, of course, doing regular inspections, well, preventative and corrective maintenance and post-assessment assessments are all ways that we help protect the dam, ensure its structural integrity. If you flip over to slide 6, this is kind of just the fundamentals of how our gate operations work. And it's as simple as it can be, but not everyone gets it right away. So basically our gate ops takes timestamps and it says, okay, it's all based on lake level. So the USGS maintains the lake level gauge there at Lake Conroe, and our gate ops are based largely on lake elevation because at one given lake elevation, there's a volume of water. At another lake elevation, there's another volume of water, et cetera, et cetera. And so it'll take it will look at lake level at one given point in time, and it'll say, okay, it's this volume. Well, 15 minutes later, it's this volume. Well, that change is the inflow. And so it calculates that, and it calculates it over and over and over and over and over. We continue to look at that, and then periodically it will say, based on that inflow, you've got this range of outflow that you can release through the dam. And it's, it kind of goes from a minor scale to a major scale. Well, it ensures that the maximum on that chart never exceeds 70% of the to-date maximum inflow. So it's an insurance.
That's your buffer.
Yes, sir. So it's your buffer. So that's what that diagram is showing, that volume at one time, volume at another time, differences that you can see. You flip to the next slide. This is just to drive home the point that our Tainer gates are also not designed to be overtopped. So the diagram on the right, you're on the downstream side of the gauge. You're looking at the framework of the gate. Just for reference, if new members aren't aware, but these Tainer gates rotate. That's why they're called radial Tainer gates, about that radius. They rotate. Water comes underneath the bottom. That structure, all that webbing and that structural steel on the backside, was not designed to handle the force of sheet flow over top of the gates, nor was the strength of it designed, the motors, the cables, all the lifting arms, to try to open with sheet flow over top of it, the weight, the shear pressure against it. So in the picture on the left, you see that's you're on the upstream side, sorry. You're right on the water, you're looking at the front of one of the gates. You can see the river down below you. We only have roughly 18 inches of what we call freeboard to play with. We got 5 gates at 18 inches. So as the lake starts rising, we have to make sure we stay on top of it, because we don't raise 5 gates all at once. We raise one gate to keep equal distribution on the spillway apron. And so that's not a lot of playing room. It's not a lot of wiggle room, only 18 inches. And so we have to, and we even, we have a minimum that we're comfortable keeping, maybe at the least 6 inches. And so we have to, the gate ops helps us stay on top of that. And if we lost all else, if we had no lake level, that's the most important thing, is make sure you keep the gates, top of the gates above the water.
The gate's constantly holding back. How much, maybe, I don't know, several feet, 4 or 5 feet of water. So you're raising it up, you're letting it out the bottom, right? But it's constant, all the gates are holding back the
Exactly.
water.
I'm glad you said
If
that.
they fail, you can't control the dam anymore.
It would be an uncontrolled.
Okay. I did not realize that.
Yes.
And 18 is like standard all the time is what you try to,
18 is what the design is. The top of the gates were designed for, I can't remember. They're 2.5, they're 202.2, 202.2, the top of the gates. Water surface elevation is 201. So that's the design freeboard, as we call it, the space that you have to play with. But yeah, you're right.
Mention side of the fence.
Oh, each of the gates, there's 5 gates, I'm sorry. Each of the gates is 40 feet wide and 30 feet tall.
30
Each of them can open to 26 feet open. Just for reference, during Hurricane Harvey, each of the 5 were open 14 feet.
Say it again. Sorry. Those
5 Tanger gates,
5 gates,
they're 40 feet wide,
40
30
feet.
feet tall.
30 feet tall.
Each one of them can open to 26 feet. And the maximum they've been opened, all 5 were open 14 feet during Hurricane Harvey.
What, do you know the numbers at Lake Houston? How many Tanger gates do they have?
Right now, they have 2. And they have 2 flashboard gates. And it's my understanding, I'm not intimately familiar with it, it's my understanding that total combined from those control structures is about 10,000 CFS. Of course, they have an overflow spillway that allows them to discharge a lot more. But as far as controlled releases, it's about 10,000 CFS.
Is there a plan in place for Lake Houston to have more gates installed?
Yes. They have an engineer on board designing, I think they're adding 12 gates east of their current gates.
They're adding how many east of
12,
12?
Why are they doing that?
2 now.
so they can release more water for flood events.
Oh, okay. So they're just not prepared for flood events.
So water supply was just like ours is. We have no freeboard for storm management. That's why we have to release.
Releasing now ahead of this storm, right? I think that was in the paper. That's read.
And we really didn't get it.
Yeah, but
Not yet. It's coming tomorrow.
It made a good point that generally speaking, reservoirs are designed either for flood control or for supply. So in flood control reservoirs, they got feet of space, intentionally designed that way, stay low. You can accept inflows. Water supply, it's the other way around. You would want to maintain our supply. Hence the reason we only have.
Okay, that makes sense.
So if you go to slide 8, I just wanted to drive home, like I said, a couple of key points. On the right, you're looking at the entire Sandstone River Basin, much of it being the upper Sandstone River Basin, and that's what we call all the basins that drain to Lake Houston. I'm going to show you another statistic here, just our number here in just a minute, but just wanted to point out how small the Lake Conroe watershed is relative to the whole basin that drains to Lake Houston, 445 square miles to roughly 2,800 square miles. And then contrast that with Lake Conroe itself is 20,000 surface acres. Lake Houston is about 10,000 surface acres. So much, much bigger watershed, relatively speaking, than Lake Conroe. If you turn to the next slide, it's kind of.
before you go to the next slide, if you look at that left slide, I don't mean to keep interrupting Brett,
That's okay.
but our watershed goes north of Highway 30 in Walker County. So and that's, the early May rain that we got, 25 inches in a very short period of time. And it was coming predominantly out of the national forest into the top lower.
One of the things I always say, I think I even have it in here, the next slide, but all storms are different, In that one of those storms, we were completely saturated. And any water that fell up there, even in the far northern reaches up around I-30, was showing up in the lake in a few hours. Whereas in other storms, if it's really dry, it'll be soaked up maybe 16, 17 hours before we ever see that water. We notice that water, but just every storm is different.
So talking about the size of the watershed, so I assume, it's the Bayou City, so you don't really have any flood or very little flood mitigation. You just let the bayous flow if you're Harris County or you have any of the.
Flood control has gone in and built a number of channels throughout Harris County to help move water from back then the sparsely developed areas down to the major tributaries.
So they're trying.
Yeah,
But
And then
like when Memorial got flooded out, there's just nothing the Corps of Engineers could do. They had to let it out.
correct.
If you flip over to the next slide, slide 9, I wanted to just give you kind of a perspective of the contribution of Lake Conroe watershed to what drains to Lake Houston. So the graphic, well, this is an ideal situation, granted, this is assuming a uniform distribution of 100-year storm across the whole basin that drains to Lake Houston. If that were the case, Lake Conroe only contributes 13% to the total drainage into Lake Houston. That's an important concept. I mean, we do hear a lot that, yes, that's true. But you're the only control structure in the zone, so you need to do what you can. Of course, that makes sense, but it is a small contributor. My whole point is when it rains on this whole area, there's a lot of water coming down, as you guys know, from Spring Creek and these other creeks, Cypress Creek.
So what you're saying is because we have some control, everything else just flows.
Yep.
Right? This is the only little dial you have, and yet it's only 13%. If all things was evenly distributed, you really
And that does consider per gate operations.
Yeah, yeah.
13% using per gate.
using your gates. Yeah. Okay.
But some people think we can just close the gate, not let any out, and that's not true. Yeah.
Or drain it before the big storm, and then it fills up, and then the Whitman gets flooded.
Here's another statistic. It takes a week at our permitted discharge rate to drop 6 inches. 1 week. Really?
Wow.
And now that's ideal too. That's no inflows at all.
Right.
And that really doesn't take into.
No additional inflow, even no incremental.
No additional inflows and really doesn't take into consideration, but we were informed last Thursday to begin releasing. And, here they are, the request was 200.5, we're 200.6.
Who makes that request?
City of Houston. I'll go into that.
Okay. And another question, Jace got a lot of flack for, was it where did Harvey, where River Plantation was flooded out?
Kingwood.
Did he or could he have gotten more water out of the lake ahead of time? Is that his call?
Well, he could have, but you're saying you really can't because you've had it open and you're only down to 200.6.
I wish I could just answer that truthfully, but there's still litigation going on with regard to.
Oh, okay.
I do have the answer, but I'll.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Technically, if we're at 201, the only way to release water is if the city of Houston calls for it. Because our water rights are already committed around the lake. They go to the surface water plant and they go to irrigators and industry around the lake.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about that too.
Okay, sorry.
2 slides.
Sorry.
On slide 10, this is just to drive home the point again. You were saying, so you're holding back water. Yeah, that's an important concept. Just Tainer gates, our gates, by strictly the way we operate them, because we're releasing less than we're letting in, hence why the lake rises, right? We're holding back, we're buffering. We hear a lot of things about, boy, you could have done more.
Mhm.
We have a flowage easement that will allow us to go all the way to 207. But we only have 18 inches of gate, so the only way we get there is to keep coming up, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of times they'll say, well, why don't you just wait till 207? Well, because we could tear one of the gates. That's not an option. So if you just look at these two diagrams, this was just to give you an example, Hurricane Harvey on the left and the January storm on the right, just to show you that, only a fraction of what actually comes into the lake is being released from the lake. So that's just to drive that home. And one thing for you to note, it's not on this, but in the May storm, we actually had more inflow into the lake than we did in Harvey, and we had less outflow than we did in Harvey. How'd you do that? Every storm's different. Where did it fall? How fast did it fall? Was it saturated? Was it not? But it's just a point. If you flip over to the next slide, this kind of gets to what's been alluded to here. We often get asked why don't we pre-release? Well, as far as SJRA is concerned, we just simply don't, and we have well-documented reasons that you can find on our website. They're valid. There's numerous ones. But in addition to that, we don't have any water. There's a permit between us and the city of Houston, and you either have your water available or you don't. And ours isn't available. It's tied up with customers. City of Houston does have some. And so they can choose what they use that for, as long as it's among the uses granted on their permit. And so they can, we can only release water when we're above 201. It's passing storm flows. They can from 201 and down if they choose to use their water rights to do so. So last Thursday, they exercised that option and asked us to start releasing, and we did. And we're still releasing right now at a modest 660 cubic feet per second.
And then during the drought, when the lake went down, that was also what was happening, right? I mean, they were calling on the water.
When in 2011,
Yeah, 11.
what happened then is we obviously evaporation contributed
Sure.
most of it, but
Okay.
I guess they had some of their treatment facilities were needed extra water. They didn't have loose bayou at the time. And so they had to call on some water just to maintain their systems.
Well, their intake structure was not far enough out into the lake.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the water just filled the lake back up where they get water. And with the new plant, the new intake structure, that's less of a problem.
Gotcha.
So what's our intake structure like if, let's say, for some reason, the city of Houston needed 2/3 of the lake and they drained it down to that far and the lake were only 1/3 full? Do our pumps, are they beneath that water line? Great. They thought of that. That's great.
But we also have a contract with Houston for their 2/3 for future water supply.
So we can purchase from their 2/3. We have a contractual agreement that we can buy water from their 2/3.
Okay.
On that same slide 11, Ed mentioned it, but I just wanted to, in red, you see there on the bottom right, one of the restrictions on the permit is a maximum diversion rate. So even though the city can call on their water, we can only send it at so fast. And that's what Ed was saying, in an ideal situation, it takes a week just to lower the lake 6 inches. Finally, on the last slide, really I've already said it, it's just to drive home those 3 points. Our number one priority has to be to protect the dam, prevent a breach for economic and all the reasons that I stated. Our maximum inflow is always, our maximum outflow is always a percentage of the maximum inflow. In other words, we're holding back, we're buffering. And that Lake Conroe is just one of the many watersheds that drains to Lake Houston, just happens to be the only one with a control structure.
Couple other facts, the lake's annual yield is around 100,000 acre feet. It evaporates about 100,000 acre feet. And
Over a year.
Over a year. And that the total volume of the lake is about 420,000 acre feet.
Evaporation, and just FYI, evaporation is a big deal on reservoirs like ours. Right now, the GRP is running at 14 million gallons a day. On a hot summer day, lot of evaporation, we can evaporate 180 million gallons in a day. They're running 14 million gallons in a day. So it just pales in comparison to that.
Wow.
That's why it's so humid.
Are we just luckier than like Canyon Lake and Travis because the drought up there? Do they do any cloud seeding up there to try to? Seriously.
No, not that I'm worried.
I think we're lucky just because of our place in Texas. We happen to be on the west side of 35 and they happen to be on the dry side.
Every Wednesday, I'm on a call. This morning, I was on a call with the West Gulf River Forecast Center and then operators from reservoirs, from basins, from the Sabine to the Brazos, LCRA out in the Highland Lakes. And some of those folks are struggling. Lake Buchanan, Lake Travis, some of those lakes down by the Rio Grande, they're very, very, very low. So some of them are actually really excited about this event that's happening.
Yeah.
They're going to finally recuperate some more. I heard LCRA say this morning that they might be able to buy themselves a year out of what happens in the next few days.
Because it's probably been 4 years, 5 years since all of the lakes were full.
Yeah. I was up at Travis 9 months ago, and I was like, wow, I couldn't believe how low it was.
Buchanan looks like it's just desolate.
Brett, thanks very much. I think I was the one who asked for this, so thank you for Ed for putting this together. I think this is super, super helpful.
This is good.
Right.
There's a lot of places where I can use this in presentations. So thank you.
Very interesting.
Great
Plus, he's
presentation.
available for speaking engagement.
Yeah,
Yes, I was gonna say, everything is just so wonderfully presented. Thank you.
good presentation too. That was fun. Thanks. Thanks for that. Okay. At
Nothing in
15.
open Session.
Sorry.
Nothing in open session.
Okay. I mean, we're going close after that. General managers
I
report.
thought I'd just have Brad go ahead and give mine too.
He's killing it.
No, I just honestly don't have much. Wanted to point out that we did conduct a couple new director orientations on June 5th. I think those went very well. And then SJA did one on the 7th, kind of in between. Coming out of that, I've identified maybe the need to develop what I'm going to call a workshop series. It kind of came to me that it might make sense to build kind of a workshop series library or a library of topics that we could maybe for all the board members across all the MUDs, not just the new ones, to really dive into certain topics, whatever that was, whatever that is. So I'd be curious to know over time if there's topics or ideas that you think you might want to hear more about, and maybe we could develop some content. We might already have some content on it, and do little mini workshop series type of things. I don't want to do hours and hours, but it might be kind of little hour-long little snippets that might be helpful to directors. So we're going to work on that, start working on that. And I don't know if it'll be quarterly or it'll be monthly. It might be based on demand. I don't have all the logistics worked out, but I just wanted to share some ideas with you that's what I'm going to try to develop.
Okay, that's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Want to point out in your packet a few articles on City of Conroe and some things they're dealing with, as well as some of the PFAS update stuff. And then also some thank yous. We had several thank yous this month that we included. I like to include, feedback that we're getting from the community. So I really appreciate that. Before I kick it over to John for the communication report update, I did want to bring to your attention a sewer collapse that we had occur. I guess it was, I don't know, Thursday. It was starting on Thursday, I think.
Yeah.
And then by Friday, we were developing. We had already moved overnight to do some things. And then by the end of the weekend, we were pretty much done with the repair, but it was a significant, Shadow.
Oh, yeah, it's in our neighborhood.
So
It's our neighborhood.
basically, it's just, if you want to call it north or northwest of Golden Shadow, I think it is, right? There's a lift station, and that lift station collects a significant amount of flow from the community feeding it. It's a 12-inch line. Last October, not even a year ago, and it's the last piece of pipe, essentially, the last 100 feet or so before it goes into the lift station, which means it's the bottom of everything's coming to that, right? So it's all the flow that's coming is coming through that pipe. Last October, we had a break in that pipe, and we essentially fixed from the break point about 40 feet downstream towards the lift station. Okay. So last Thursday, we had a major collapse in that area again, and dug and we got bypass pumping set up. We got a bunch of other things just so we could start digging, because sewage, as you can imagine, is going. Identified that there was and confirmed that there was a break about 6 or 7 feet to the upstream side of the fix that came last year. And then there's 60 feet left from that point up to the nearest manhole. And so I called Hugh, talked to him a little bit about my recommendation. We had to move pretty quickly. And so what we determined was to go ahead, and we asked the contractor for a price on just going ahead and fixing the remaining 60 feet up to the manhole. Because typically if you're going to do a section of pipe, you really want to do it between manhole and manhole. And, last year at this time, it was about $50,000 fix. Well, we got an estimate from the contractor to finish out that remaining 60 for $49,750 or whatever. And I thought that was a good price. They were already on site. they had bypass pumping set up, and so we went ahead and pulled the trigger on that. So you will probably see those, obviously those expenses come in the next month or so,
Did
but
it smell bad in that neighborhood? That's where all of you live.
I don't know.
So I got quite a few calls.
There was, there was a lot of cleanup. It definitely was a spill, for sure.
It didn't get into anyone's home.
Correct.
There was a lot of rumor running around. I don't know where all that came from. I asked Eric if they had sent out a notice, because when I got a call, it was like, oh, I just saw a notice that we need to come, if we've been asked to restrict our water usage during the time where this repair goes place. I'm like, oh, I didn't get that. It's like, gee, I must not be paying attention.
Social media.
I was not in town at the time, but I asked my wife, said, do you heard anything? I asked a bunch of other people, said, no, this was just rumor. It was people talking. I think people next to the break, right? That little neighborhood right there. I think they were kind of handy helping you all.
The bridge, a little right around the corner from it.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
literally your backyard, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, but I'm down the bayou a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I think one of the takeaway and some of the questions I had was, well, what should we do? Is it worth? There was one room that said, oh, they don't have the equipment. It's going to be weeks. You know, when these things just kind of happen, right? They get a life of their own. I asked Eric, I said, did you send out a notice? He said, no. So I didn't know where this was coming from. It was just people on the ground, I think, talking, maybe interacting with your project managers there, who said, hey, if you can, you know, maybe reduce water flow. It got me thinking about what kind of communications do you do? How do you kind of trigger a communication? You probably can't target those homes just on that lateral, be my bet, very easily.
Good.
I think
But there also was not a change or a stoppage in service.
Yeah.
That would be the major trigger point to send information out.
So what happened because of the rumor mill, some people started panicking, and some people have empty homes during the summer because they go north to get out of the heat. And they were like, we need to go check on their home because I'm supposed to be looking after it to make sure there's not flooding with stuff. You know, so I think a little communication goes a long way. And as infrastructure starts having more and more, but something for you all to think about. How do you trigger it? How big? When do you do it? I get your point that just sending it out, you know, in a big way, if you can target it pretty well, I think just people say, oh, okay, we're on it. We understand it. And then what do you do in case of? And I guess there's another set of communication. Can you do at your home to prevent it from backing up inside your home, for example?
Engineering question on that. Isn't the answer to that question, open your 4-inch clean out?
Yeah.
And you can't go into your house if you're letting it out in the yard.
That's
It might be gross, but
If you know where your clean out is.
it's the way.
Yeah.
And you gotta know.
Clean out is lower than the slab.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That's true.
Okay.
I
Well, if you
reckon
get built,
everybody knows
yes,
their
everyone
clean out.
starts like
This would be
that.
a good class to have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
One of your good classes.
We learned some things over the years.
I couldn't tell you where my clean out's at, I can tell you
When I
that.
lived in Harper's, I always made sure that it was finger
Yeah.
tight.
Yeah.
So have a
Just in
good
case.
bed sheet to put
Because
on it too.
it's tightened down pretty good. That nut on top is about that big. It's not just a regular plier, set of pliers that opens it.
Yeah.
So I always had it closed.
Easy.
Yeah.
So maybe something to think about on communications protocol, just to, as an example, if we have more breaks on the water side or normally on the
Yeah, we could do it
wastewater.
as- in outages, but we certainly could. We knew that there weren't gonna be any outages. We had it contained with bypass pumping within the evening, you know, so it was a few hours. There was spillage on the ground in that immediate area, but we also knew that that was the lowest point. So as long, backing up is if there was a stoppage, then it would have backed up at homes. So as long as it was flowing this way, we knew there would be, one, it wouldn't be in homes and there wouldn't be any outages.
Makes sense.
And we were moving to get the bypass pumping and the cleanup process going immediately until we could figure out how to, you know, what pipe we were about to fix and where the break was.
Can you rush in a septic tank truck and just collect it for a while? Is that how it works?
Yeah, you could pump it up, sure. And I don't know, we might have done that at one
We
point.
did on the October one. We had a Vector truck come out and Vector it just because we couldn't find the well point to dig it up. It was so wet.
It's really expensive to do that.
Oh.
Really expensive per gallon. And so if we can, what we did is we immediately called the contractor that fixed that pipe a year ago. Because initially we were thinking, if he fixed it, and it's the same, you need to go fix your problem that, you know, you're responsible. That's initially we weren't sure where the break was, but we knew that it was close to where that break was before. We found out it wasn't. The pipe has its own issues because it's old truss pipe, and this was actually a radial crack. So it just instead sometimes you have longitudinal cracks across the top or whatever. This actually sheared this way radially. So it was broke, but it's fixed now.
Okay. Well, good. Thanks for fixing it.
We won't have to worry about that section of pipe breaking in the future, or the truss pipe breaking, because we replaced it back to the mill.
Is there a lot of truss pipe in Cochran's?
There's a lot of truss pipe all over.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling you today, that was, in the 70s and early 80s, it was all concrete, a lot of concrete pipe. And, after 25, 30 years, I've replaced hundreds of miles of it. Concrete pipe disintegrates from 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock. After about 25 years, the pipe's gone from the sewer gases. So in the early 80s, roughly, they started using truss pipe. And that was, I don't know if that was, I wasn't around, but the story goes, that was generally.
Look it over there.
Right at,
Yeah,
you were doing engineering.
Yeah, really.
I was
The
alive.
voice of reason.
Well, but the point being is that
Kindergarten,
early plastic pipes. And what we found over the years was if it was bedded and backfilled properly, it's a good pipe. But, construction methods around the Houston metro area in the 70s and 80s were not what they are in my career. We have a lot of oversight, in my career, but back in the day, stories are not the same. So you can potluck whether or not you have good bedding backfill. But in this case, it broke twice within 8 months or 10 months. So we're there.
Okay.
So that was a long discussion, but thank you.
Yep.
And so I'll kick it to John for the comments report.
Steven.
Hey, John.
I think I heard the question, can we isolate with our communications? Can we zero where we can through WaterSmart? If we have good contact information for them, we can do a little polygon and just hit those folks. Page 42, you got your communications report. First page there, it's a nice reminder of some of our guiding strategic plan materials, communication goals, and goals for our third quarter focus, which is water conservation. Then atop page 43, we've had some nice developments there in our work with Holloway Infrastructure Renewal Communications Consultant. So we received a number of materials from them, we being the Public Education Committee. We have process of reviewing those materials and providing our comments to SRA will then funnel to Holloway. You can see those materials are outlined there. I do want to note that we have discussed having an all directors meeting with Holloway. So you can meet directly with them, ask questions, share information. Just want to keep your all directors as informed as possible about this campaign and our work with Holloway. So we don't have that on the calendar yet, but we're thinking sometime probably the next maybe 4 to 6 weeks, maybe a little bit longer out than that.
Probably more like August or so.
Okay, maybe, okay. And then some current advertising materials there. I do want to note on the bottom of page 44, the water bill, those actually got flip-flopped. Our current bill, the May bill, is out. That's the orange one. That's on our auto pay is moving over to WaterSmart. So we're messaging a lot of that. We're getting folks moved over to WaterSmart. And then for the June bill, it's mailed out at the end of this month. We are highlighting the fact that the consumer confidence reports are coming out, the water quality reports. So those get mailed to every customer. We also send them out via email. We post them online and where they'll live year round. And then social media, we really try to highlight those and get people to look at them and understand the water quality a little bit better. That's a summary report from 2023. And with that, any questions?
The tax summary we talked about in Q4, I'd like to be involved in that. I've been communicating with another resident and he's got some good ideas. So I'll print all that stuff out and we can powwow and
I think it'll be a fantastic message to get out. And like we've talked, we have messaged on it before, but I think we need to do more, and the water bill would be great for that.
Yeah, good idea. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Okay. 17 trustee report, do we?
I think we've talked about pretty much most of it already. The main point was listening to the three-piece proposal.
Yep. That was the big discussion.
Okay. Thanks for attending.
Hey, no problem.
Appreciate it. Okay, 19, we're going to close session.
Sir,
All right. Hope we're not in trouble.
Curtis, there, everybody else?